this is an actual photo of people playing golf while there is a raging forest fire behind them. I looked it up because I saw this last year, but I looked it up just to make sure if this is real and not Photoshopped. This is a real photo. It was not Photoshopped, okay? Now, what isn't real is this hypothetical situation I'm going to put you guys in right now, okay? Let's say that you're one of the golfers, okay, and you're competing against someone that you really are competitive with and you really want to win. But what has to happen is you're on the last hole and it's the last putt. You have to hit this putt in to win the game, okay? But here is the dilemma. If you putt, you're going to make it and you're going to win the game, but you'll lose your life to the fire, okay? Or you forfeit winning the game, but you save your life. What would you choose? If you're a diehard golfer, you're like, I don't know, tough one. But if you're not really a diehard golfer and you're not very competitive, you would run for your life, right? All right, now, all of us, today's message is called Losing to Win. All of us have a choice. Do we live for the short-term win, or do we live for the long-term win? That's the choice we all have in this room. How do we live our life? Do we live for the immediate pleasures of life, or do we live for the long-term pleasures of life, living for Jesus? Now, sometimes, because our hearts are so crafty, we can deceive ourselves into thinking that we're playing to win, when really we're just playing it safe. Remember the guy with one talent? What does he do with his one talent? His boss gives him one talent to use. What does he do? He buries it. Okay? What's he doing? He's not playing to win. He's playing it safe. He's thinking, well, if I use the money, this talent that my boss has given me, you know, I might lose it. I might mess up a deal. It's better for me to just hold on to it and just bury it here, and when he comes back, I'll give it back to him. And what we find out is that although he's thinking there's danger and there's risk in trying to use what his boss has given him, there's even more danger in not taking the risk. There's even more danger when God gives us talents and abilities and resources and we say, you know what, God, I'm afraid to use it. There's more danger in not trying. This is our main text. It's Matthew chapter 10, verse 39. Jesus says, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. If you've grown up in the church, you've heard this, and so it's easy to skim over it. But what in the world is Jesus talking about? If I lose my life, I'm going to gain life. And if I keep my life, I'm going to lose my life. What in the world are you talking about, Jesus? And so hopefully by the end of this message, we'll just be reminded of the things that we already know, or we've learned a little bit more about what is Jesus talking about here. Now, I do believe that in order to obey this principle, we need motivation. We need motivation. I believe it's hard to let go of things in our life that we're meant to let go of in order to find real life. So we need motivation. This guy has motivation. It's behind him, right? Okay. The motivation that we need to obey this idea of letting go of one life to grab onto a new life is actually found in our main text. There's two main motivations from this main text. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So the first motivation is if we don't lose, we lose. If we don't let go of the things Jesus is saying, let go of it, trust me, let go of it, it's not worth holding on to. You can gain the whole world, but if you lose your soul, you've lost everything. If we don't lose, we lose. How many of you know Jesus was different? Very different. He was different not just in how he did things, he was different in his identity, who he really was, but his ministry was different, his disciples were different. And in our main text is Matthew chapter 10, but in the previous chapter, in chapter 9, we find out that there's Pharisees who are noticing that Jesus is different and his ministry is different. And when things look very different than what you're familiar with and what you're used to, they stand out. And you kind of wonder, should I be against this guy? Should I be against this person? Because they're so different. And so in chapter 9 alone, just in chapter 9, this is what the Pharisees ask. Why is Jesus forgiving sins? Why is Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners? Why don't Jesus' disciples fast? That's Matthew chapter 9. They're wondering, why is Jesus different? And why is his disciples different? Why does he behave differently? This is not what we're familiar with and what we're used to and what we've always done in our lifetime. Jesus is different. Jesus is different, and it makes them very uncomfortable. I have thought in the past, man, I would love to go back in time and see Jesus in his ministry, but that's assuming that I would go back in time and not be a Pharisee. There is a very good chance that if I went back in time and I lived in that time and I was brought up being one of the religious leaders, I could very well be just as guilty as some of these Pharisees right here, looking at Jesus and saying, yeah, I've never done that. I've never tried that. I've never seen anyone try that before in their ministry. No, that can't be good. I don't know what this young rabbi is doing, but it's different, and I don't like it. All right, so there's this dilemma with these Pharisees. If they don't let go of what they're familiar with, their ways, their methods, they're going to completely miss out on what Jesus is doing and how he's making a difference in people's lives. This dilemma that they have back then is one that we can fall into very easily still today. Because we can look at our lives, our short lives, even if you're 100 and something years old in this room. Is there anyone? They can't hear me. Okay. But even if you're 100 and something in this room, you've only lived a short period of time in the scheme of history. And to look back in your 100 years and say, I've never seen that, I've never done that, that's different, I don't know, we can fall right into this idea of, well, if it's not familiar, then I'm going to be against it. And then we can miss out on what Jesus himself is doing and making a difference in other people's lives. Well, I just never went to a church that did things like that. So are you going to be right against it just because you're not familiar? And so I know and I admit to you that if I went back in time, I could very easily fall into this Pharisee trap because we can fall into it so easily right now today. Is that true? Absolutely. So the first motivation for letting go of one life and grabbing onto another is if we don't let go, then we lose. We lose something that's very valuable. Another way of seeing it is in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 7. Paul is writing to a church that is so messed up that there's lawsuits among the Christians in that church. And they're suing each other. All right? And so he writes to them and he says, the very fact that you have lawsuits among you means you have been completely defeated already. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? Paul says, why don't you lose to win? Why don't you lose some money? Let your brother who robbed you keep the money. Why don't you lose so that you win a good testimony and reputation? Because right now, if you keep trying to win your lawsuit, you're going to wreck, you're going to lose your testimony to this world. When the world looks in and says, should we join the church? And the church is so divided and there's so much fighting and inward fighting, the world says, not with that testimony, not with what they're doing. I can't join that. And so if we don't lose, we lose. I think it was last month or the month before, someone posted this on Facebook, and it just caught my attention. It says, the primary concern for many Christians is our churches. We see how they're wrinkling and shrinking, how they're aging and experiencing numerical decline. We know how important church has been in our lives, and we want to save our churches from going the way of the phone booth, cassette player, or landline. But whenever I find myself in conversations about saving the church, I can't help but recall Jesus' words. If you want to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. Jesus' words make me wonder, could our desire to save our precious religious institutions and traditions actually hasten their demise? Could it be that the Spirit of God is calling the church to stop trying to save itself and instead to join God in saving the world? Could pouring itself out for the good of the world be the only way for the church to save its own soul? I was like, when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness. There is a lot of insight there. And I've seen this play out where sometimes we don't want something to happen, so we try to control it so much that we almost squeeze it to death and we hasten its demise. There are some traditions we can get so attached to, we're so familiar with, we love, we grew up, and we've never seen anything different in our 100 years. And then we hold on to it as tight as we can, and we hold on to it even if it hurts the future, even if it hurts the next generation. We hold so tightly. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to lose it. And then we lose everything. If we don't lose, we lose. Now, I believe there are definitely some traditions in churches all over the world, including here, that we need to not have a tight grip on. We need to be able to say, you know what, this is a tradition that worked really well, but it's not reaching the next generation. It has become a hindrance and a hurdle. And what would Jesus want us to do? What did Jesus want to do when he walked this planet 2,000 years ago with traditions that were in the way of reaching people? Let go of them. When they stop working, you let go. Now, why do we begin traditions to begin with? We start them because they work, right? We say, hey, that worked this year. Let's do it again next year, right? There are some traditions that we were coming up to that work, right? How many of you are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving? That's a tradition. That's a good one. It still works. The turkey still works, right? Okay. There are some traditions that we have that work, that are going great, but there's some traditions that are becoming hurdles that they worked 50 years ago, but they are getting higher and higher and higher hurdles for outsiders to jump over. And I believe we need to hear Jesus say, hey, it's time to reconsider the traditions you're holding so tightly to, because it's killing the church. Now, there's a series I'm working on coming up called Rethink. And we're going to dive into some of these things that we've concluded as, you know what, this is a tradition we don't want to let go of. But I want to challenge you to come back and really think through with me, Jesus, is this really something I should hold so tightly to? Or is this something you're telling me, hey, you need to let go of that? That's not something I said. It was the Word of God. That was simply a man-made tradition, and it's hurting my church. Stop hurting my church. So I encourage you to come back to that series is in the near future called Rethink. All right, there was two farmers who were both poor, and they had one seed. Each of them had one seed, and it was a sunflower seed. The first farmer went out to sow his sunflower seed. He dug a hole, and he got the seed ready, and right before he was about to put it in, he looks at the seed, and he says, oh, this is a beautiful seed. This is like a zebra, you know. I'm going to hold on to it. So he puts it in his pocket and he goes back inside. The other farmer, he digs a hole. He takes that seed and he says, this is a beautiful seed, but I wonder what it will produce. And he puts it in the ground and he buries it. All right, it's harvest time. The first farmer, of course, has nothing to harvest because he held on to the seed. But the other farmer, he went out and he found there was a beautiful sunflower that had much bigger than this one even, okay? But this is for props. Thank you very much, Nancy. All right. And he started counting how many seeds was in this sunflower, and he counted over 1,000 seeds. Over 1,000 seeds. Because he was willing to let go, he was able to gain so much more. Then I was curious, well, how many seeds can actually be produced with one sunflower? And this is what, according to sunflowerguide.com, it says one sunflower can produce between 1,000 and 2,000 seeds. What seeds in your life are you holding on to in your pocket, thinking, I think I want to keep it for myself? What seeds, what talents, what abilities, what resources could you get out of your pocket? Say, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna give this. I'm gonna share this. I'm gonna see what it can produce in other people's lives. Number two, the first motivation is if we don't lose, we lose. The second motivation is if we lose, we gain so much more. If we are willing to let go of the things we're meant to let go of, we end up gaining so much more. And I believe once we really believe this, it gets easy to let go of things. When we think that the thing we're holding on to is still worth so much, and I don't know if it's really worth letting go of and grabbing onto this, it's hard to let go. But once we say, wait a minute, this is dirt, that's gold. This is dirt, that's gold. No brainer. Let go of the dirt and grab onto the gold, what's really, truly valuable. How many of you growing up did the monkey bars? You know? Yeah. Okay, in order to do the monkey bars, let's say you go halfway, okay? You're holding on to both. If you want to get to the next one, what do you have to do with your hands? You have to let go. And if you don't let go, you get stuck right there. And then you get calloused, and then it hurts, and now you're crying for your mom to help you get down. But if you want to keep going and progressing, you have to be willing to let go of the rung or the bar that you're holding on to grab onto the next thing that God wants for you in your life. So if we lose, we gain so much more. Erica Jong said, loving someone is a loss of freedom, but one doesn't think of it as a loss because one gains so much else. Getting married to Melissa, I lost some freedoms, right? I couldn't just go wherever, do whatever. I couldn't go on dates with other girls. Why? Because I need to be faithful to my wife. I lost some of my freedoms, okay? But it doesn't feel like a loss because I gained so much more. When we had kids, we totally lost some freedoms. When you're a couple and you don't have kids yet, you can just go see the movies. You're like, oh, that movie came out. Let's go watch it. Let's go to the movie theaters. Nope, not for the next 15 or 20 years. We won't be able to do that. And so we lost some freedom, but we gained so much more. And here's the key, because some people are saying, well, I have kids, and I don't think I gained very much by having kids. And here's the key, you have to love them. Notice she says loving someone is a loss of freedom, but yet you gain so much more. It's when you love your kids and you love your spouse that you gain so much more. When you just exist with them, you're forfeiting, you're losing. All right. In Mark chapter 10, verse 29, Jesus says, truly I tell you, Jesus replied, no one who has left homes or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life. I have seen this in my own life. I have experienced this for myself. I have seen, I have a lot of moms in the church. One is sitting right there. Paige is my mom here in Tucson. And I have grandparents. I have many dads in the church. All right, and I've seen other people who, when they become Christians and they leave another faith, I have seen them get kicked out of their own home. And when they get kicked out because they follow Christ, they are welcomed and embraced by the church. Your family kicked you out? This is your family now. Hector, who passed away a few months ago, he saw Ina as his extended family. This was his family. All right, so the second main motivation is, if we lose, we gain so much more. How many of you saw the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer? Anyone? Not a soul. One person. Oh, wow. Okay. Great movie. At least I think it was, because I saw it a long time ago, and I was younger, so maybe it isn't as good. But back then, I remember it being really good, right? And it's based on this young chess player who's so good that he just wins these championships. Well, what I didn't know, that I found out just recently, that was based on a true story. It was based on a guy named Josh Waitzkin, who ended up winning 21 national chess championships, and then he vanished. He just walked away from it all. He was still young. He could have still won way more championships, but he just gets up and leaves. And then, this is crazy, he leaves chess to learn martial arts. And he starts winning a whole bunch of martial arts competitions. Okay, here's a guy who has learned to master his mind with chess, and then he walks away from that to learn how to master his body. And he does that. And then he writes a book called The Art of Learning, which is great coming from him because he learned how to play chess with his mind. He learned how to develop discipline with his body. And he talks about the art of learning, okay? I just found about this week studying for the sermon, and it's pretty exciting for me. In the book, he says you've got to learn how to lose to win. Some of the same concepts we read in scriptures are in this book. You've got to learn to lose to win. What does he mean by that? He says one of the biggest hurdles you have as a student, as a beginning learner of anything, whether you're learning an instrument or a language, is ego. When your cup is full, there's no room to grow and develop. You got to empty that cup and say, I am all ears. I want to learn as much as I can. My ego is gone. I am not afraid to admit, I don't know. I don't know, but I want to know. Teach me. Show me. That's what makes a great student. He says you got to be willing to get beat up a little bit to learn, okay? Beat up by this new language. Get beat up a little bit by this new skill, okay? Get calluses on your fingers while you're learning to play the guitar, all right? Then he says, and you got to let go of trying to look good. How many of you have ever really wanted to look good in front of people? Anyone? Okay, yeah, you better raise your hand. Like, we're human. Like, we want to look good in front of people, okay? Sometimes, though, we want to look good so much in front of people that we make it a priority, and when we don't know something, and we should be raising our hands and saying, hey, teacher, I don't know what you're talking about. Please share with me, tell me, give me insight, help me out. We don't want to look like we don't know, and so we don't raise our hand, and we don't learn. So one of the fastest ways to speed up the learning process is to let go of ego and let go of trying to look good. And all of a sudden, you start to speed up the process of learning because you start asking the questions. Teach me. Show me. I don't know that. Say it again. There was a couple who they were looking into buying a home, and they wanted to make sure that it was what God wanted. So they're praying about it, and they're saying, God, this is a true story. They say, God, if you don't want us to buy this home, please shut the doors so that we can't buy this home. So they're praying. They definitely want to be in God's will. So they're praying. The doors remain open. So they end up buying the home. 5 years later, after they bought the home, they look at how much their home costs, and it has decreased so much. They've lost so much money. They spent this much, it's now worth this much. And now they're frustrated and they're saying, why did God let the doors stay open? We prayed specifically, God, close doors. If you don't want us to get this house, then shut the doors. Why did you keep the doors open? Why did you let us buy this home and we lose so much financially? And one night, the wife was praying and she believed that God was trying to communicate to her this idea. Maybe God wanted them in the neighborhood to minister there rather than bolster their financial equity. And she started thinking about how they have developed relationships in the neighborhood, and people know that they're Christians, and that there have been a lot of spiritual, rich relationships in that neighborhood. And she told her husband that, and they both concluded, that's exactly right. We lost financially, but we gained so much spiritually. And sometimes God will put us in situations where we lose financially, but we gain spiritually. And it's so much worth it. To build and invest into eternal relationships is so worth it. So following Jesus is not a risk-free life. If you're looking for a risk-free life, you got to go somewhere else. Jesus, just think about, we are to be followers of Jesus. Who are we following? Where does Jesus often go? Where do we see him go in scriptures? Does he go the safest route? Does he go the route of risk-free zones? I think that's not going to be risky. Hey guys, come over here. Let's just hide in this boat. No, he gets on a boat that goes into a storm. He gets into a boat that it lands and there's thousands of people that need help. He goes into people's lives, and is there risks involved? Yes, multiple times people tried to kill him. But he says, follow him. And he doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't say, follow me and I'll make sure you never have to take a risk. He says, follow me, by the way, is dangerous. So stick close to me. I'll be with you. You're not going to be alone. I'll lead the way. But it's not a risk-free life. And if we look at where he ends up at the end of his ministry on that cross, and he says even before he gets to the cross to potential disciples, he says, pick up your cross, deny yourself, and follow me. He's saying this could happen to you too. Pick up your cross, and if I tell you to love sacrificially, watch how I do it. So you'll be ready to do it on the day you have to pick up your cross and love sacrificially. Losing to win. Where do we see this concept the greatest throughout all of history? At the cross. With Jesus, who is willing to lay down his life. He's willing to lose his life so that he can gain the lost, you and me. Jesus is the ultimate example of what it looks like to lose to win so much more. And what blows my mind is that he looks at us and he says, this is so much more. Now, my question though is, Jesus, when you talked about the teaching of losing to win, that's a hard teaching, that's a hard concept, and you said that before the cross. Now, after the cross, now that you've been raised from the dead, what is your stance? Do you really still want people to lose to win? Or have you changed your teachings? And I think the answer comes from Matthew 28, verse 20, where Jesus says, go into all the world and baptize. And then he says, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. In other words, Jesus is saying, hey, everything I said before the cross still matters, and I still want it done. And so I have not backpedaled from this idea of, hey, you need to lose your life to gain real life. He says, no, go tell people. They need to lose their life to gain real life.